Welcome back to the show. Thank you so much for joining me. I want to show you this article here. This was from the Washington Post. It says, House Oversight Committee chairwoman requests FBI probe of Parler, including its role in Capitol siege. It says Representative Maloney says she's planning to launch an investigation into the conservative site's policies, ownership, and alleged Russia ties. Oh, yeah. Says here, the chairwoman of the House Oversight and Reform Committee on Thursday asked the FBI to conduct a robust examination of the alleged role in the January 6th Capitol siege of Parler, the now disabled social media site that bristled with violent chatter before and after a mob stormed the Capitol in a rampage that left one police officer and 4 rioters dead. Representative Carolyn Maloney, Democrat from New York, the chairwoman, said the request is a step toward opening a formal committee investigation into sites that may encourage violence, including Parler. The site became prominent last year as a freewheeling alternative to Twitter, gaining popularity in particular among conservatives. Goes on to say she said the committee will begin its formal investigation of Parler and similar sites, and that it was a top priority for her to learn answers to a range of questions about Parler, including its alleged ties to Russia, as documented in news reports. Her letter to FBI Director Christopher A. Wray on Thursday singled out Parler's use of a Russian-owned web services company, DDoS Guard, that also has Russian government clients and may leave Parler vulnerable to data requests by Russian agencies. I mean, does this ever end with Russia? Seriously? I mean, they really are just pulling one on us, aren't they? And they just never shut up about Russia, like Russia is the big threat. Russia is not our big threat. Are they a competitor? Sure. They're not even that big of a competitor. Our big competitor is China, really. But here's the thing. What they're really doing here, it's not just about the Russia thing. What's really going on here is now that they're now not only deplatforming Parler wasn't enough, essentially. Kicking Trump off of Twitter wasn't enough. Getting rid of Parler and essentially completely eradicating it from the internet wasn't enough. Now they're wanting to hold Parler criminally liable for the things that happened at the Capitol. That is they're wanting to say, well, you have these connections to Russia, and because you have these connections to Russia, you then are criminally liable for these actions because you're now basically an enemy of the state and you're operating as an enemy of the state. So doing this now, what gets really important about this is they're saying this is a formal investigation into Parler and similar sites, meaning anything conservative. And it's a top priority, they say, that they're going to be investigating these sites. So that means Democrats now are absolutely going to be in favor of getting rid of Section 230. Now, let me tell you the scary place where this leads. Because getting rid of Section 230, what does that mean? Well, now, look, I believe that these internet giant, these big tech giants need to be held somehow accountable, but not liable for the content that happens on their site. I want them held accountable for their behaving like publishers when they're not supposed to be behaving like publishers because they have Section 230 protections. This was something that they negotiated years ago. They said, hey, listen, people are going to be using our services. They're going to be saying a lot of wild things. We can't possibly in real time, as these services grow, moderate these sites fast enough. Somebody inevitably is going to say something on our site and we will not have control over it. And so we want immunity from these things that might happen. I mean, we'll do our best to take content off that is illegal. And maybe, we'll have some agreements of what's offensive. But beyond that, we can't be liable if somebody in real time says something and we don't catch it. So the government agreed. That's true. You should have Section 230 protections because you're essentially operating like a utility. Just like a telephone company cannot be held liable for crimes that are planned using their phone services. We don't go after T-Mobile and say, well, guess what? This mass murderer was using your services in order to text other mass murderers when they got together and they decided to raid this place and do things like mass murder. We don't then go and say, therefore, you're held liable because they used your service. If your service didn't exist, they wouldn't have been able to communicate with one another, and therefore the crime would have never happened. So therefore, you should not exist. That's the line of reasoning. So if they're going after Parler, what this means is they're going after Section 230. Now, Trump was going after Section 230. Republicans were going after Section 230. And that I understood that what they were doing was they were threatening. They were saying, okay, we're going to threaten to get rid of it unless you guys stop behaving like publishers. That was the Republican angle on it. They were saying, we want you to start behaving less like publishers, stop censoring because you have Section 230 protections. And if you're going to behave in a way like a publisher, then you shouldn't have Section 230 protections. I understand that logic. But the problem is if you take Section 230 protections away and you say, all right, fine, now you're liable for everything, what do you think the company's responses are going to be? If we repeal Section 230, and these Democrats who are now going after Section 230 inadvertently because they're saying we want to hold Parler accountable. Well, Parler technically falls under the realm of Section 230. In order to do that, you have to get rid of Section 230. So now that's what Democrats are going to want to do for different reasons, because they want to be able to control content. Republicans said, we don't think you deserve protection if you're going to control content. And Democrats say, we don't want you to have these protections because we want you to control content. So if they get rid of Section 230, that means big tech is going to control content even more. The answer is not going to be, oh, shoot, our mistake, you're right, we shouldn't censor. You know what, let's go back to no censorship. No, instead, they're going to say, oh, crap. Looks like we're going to have to censor everybody because we don't want any liability whatsoever. You're a liability. You've got to go. We're wiping you off. What this means is, do you remember the good old days back when you only had like 5 television choices? I don't know if you're old enough. Some of you are, some of you aren't. But back in the day, you could only watch 5 television channels on your television. This was before cable. So you could watch, your typical, your NBC, your ABC, your Fox. Fox came a little bit later. But you get your basic channels. And that was all that there was when it came to television. And then one day, cable came. Cable. Now this was exciting because when cable came to television, it was behind a paywall, which meant it wasn't regulated by the government. That meant all kinds of stuff could happen on cable television, and all kinds of stuff did happen on cable television. In the early days of cable, people could cuss. They thought that was the coolest thing in the world. You could actually say shit on TV. You could never say that in network television. Oh no, that was for families. But cable was for the paying customer. And so they didn't have to be regulated by the government. It wasn't the free stuff that automatically gets pumped into your house. So cable was kind of the Wild West of television, and we saw everything, including pornography. I mean, if you remember back in the day, Cinemax was called Skinemax by people because at night it turned into a softcore porn channel. And that was on your cable. If you paid for cable, that's what you would get. You could get Skinemax. You could get Howard Stern. He was on, and asking all of the people, his guests, to do all the kind of crazy, wild antics. And that was the early days of cable. But now cable has changed. And now cable is more like regular network television. You don't see as wild of stuff on cable like what you used to back in the early days of cable. Cable is now more, it's cleaned up. It's cleaned up its act. It's more, because it's so common and everybody has cable, they had to make sure that most things were more family friendly. So they got rid of the softcore porn channels and Howard Stern and all of that stuff. That stuff just didn't exist as much, and it doesn't exist as much anymore on cable. So what they're intending to do is turn the internet into the new mainstream. The internet, they don't want internet news that's independent. People like me working out of a bedroom, because that's where I do, I'm in a bedroom. They don't want that. What they're going to want going forward when they repeal Section 230 and they're liable and now they have to actually regulate is they're only going to host shows that they are partnered with, shows that they approve of, shows that they have, that they can regulate in some way. They're going to turn the internet into cable. Internet now is what cable was, but internet is going to become what cable is. And that's what they're doing to the internet now. That is the plan. That is the way forward. That is why we cannot be for the removal of Section 230. Because when we do that, It means that they will have no choice. They will not be able to stand the legal liability of all of us that say whatever we want, whenever we want, because we're able to just stream live on their platforms. They'll say that is ending. And we're only going to allow partner programs, partner affiliates only, who abide by our rules. We've gone through their content. We approve of everything they've said. And those are the only channels we're going to allow on our services. And when they cross the line, we just remove them and oh, well, because we can't be liable for the things they say. So that is where the internet is headed. And that is scary for people like myself. That's scary for many other people who do online-based independent shows. And many of them are very popular, receive more views than CNN and more news than other mainstream outlets and more views than any other mainstream outlet. And yet they're threatening to remove all of us because once these companies become liable, that is the end for us. They will not want us on their platforms. They'll say that we are too much of a liability and we just don't go with the mainstream narrative. And it will be the end of independent news. And I don't know where we'll go. I don't know what will be the new YouTube when that happens. And then will there be able to be one? Because if there's no Section 230 protection, then any free speech platform can't really be free speech because they'll be held liable. They won't have any protection. It's a disaster. The Parlers of the world would not be able to rise up. Even if they found a new web hosting service run by Russians, they wouldn't be able to crop up because they would be liable for any content posted on their site that anyone could sue for. The government could shut them down for. It's a very, very scary place to march towards. And that is my big fear. So hopefully I have somewhat convinced you. If some of you were still on the fence about Section 230, hopefully I have convinced you that the way forward is not to attack Section 230, to not go after platforms such as Parler for the content that some people may or may not have posted on their platform. But instead, the right way forward is to say to these companies, they are now utilities, just like the telephone service. And we do not shut down telephone service to people who we think might commit crimes. We don't even shut down their telephone service if they do commit crimes. They're still allowed their cell phones. They're still allowed telephone service when they get out of jail. They can go get a cell phone. Nobody says no, but that's where they committed the crime. So we can't let that happen. They need to be regulated the same way our telecommunications companies are regulated. That is the way forward. And we should all be against, collectively together, against the attempts to make platforms such as Parler liable for the content that goes on their sites. They, of course, need to do some good faith removal of content that is illegal. They do need to do that. We do not want illegal content on these sites, such as child pornography or the selling of illegal whatever, or advocating for crimes, planning murders, things like that. Of course, that stuff needs to be removed. And that always has been. And we have been okay with the removal of illegal content. But the rest of it needs to fall under some sort of act similar to the Telecommunications Act. And that is the path forward. We all need to be standing together in solidarity saying we must keep Section 230, and instead we must turn internet companies and especially web hosting services into utilities, and they need to be regulated as such. All right. I want to end the show with this. I want to show you this video I was sent this video, and it's a Boogaloo boy. Am I saying it right? Boogaloo? I don't know because I don't follow these groups. But it's a Boogaloo boy, and he is talking really, you just have to watch the video because it's so much of what I've been saying of we are not each other's enemy, but we do have so much in common no matter which side of the aisle we are on. So just watch this video.
Antifa, Boogaloo, and right-wing militias, they are the antibodies, not the disease that is destroying our country. The disease is a country run by two corrupt political parties that do not care about you. So deeply incestuous with corporations that they're indistinguishable from each other. A government that spent 6 months debating whether to give their own people $600, but only 24 hours to unanimously agree to give billions of dollars to foreign tyrannical governments and corporations. A government that has bombed villages overseas my entire life for my supposed safety here. This is a call for unity. For all of American people that realize the true threat against us to come together. For every mother mourning her children that was killed by police, for every business crushed down by state lockdowns, for every broken soldier sent to fight wars that have no point. This is our last chance to avoid either a tyrannical government or a bloody and pointless civil war among American people who do not have that much against each other and have more in common than they realize. And a message to the government. We come in peace. We do not intend to commit violence, but I am pleading with you, with tears in my eyes and cracks in my voice. If you continue to oppress the American people, they will remain rational no longer. Thank you.
What do you mean by that? What is this about?
Thank you.
So there you have it. We have more in common than we don't. We need to unite together. And he's absolutely right. This is something I've been saying for a long time. People might think that they're on the opposite sides of the aisle, but actually they're fighting the same thing. They might point their anger. They might point their distress in different places. They might place blame in various different places. But the truth is, it's all one and the same problem. And he absolutely was very right. So I just wanted to show that to you, to show you that there are people that get it. And even the most extreme people that are standing there, you know, in like military gear, they get it. They absolutely get it. There's also another really great video that I tomorrow or Monday I'll share it with you, a little bit of it. But it's actually a Proud Boy leader and a BLM leader who became friends, and they share they talk in a podcast, and I'll show you some of that next week. Because again, it's inspiring to see people from both sides get together and realize that they actually have more in common than not. All right, guys, thank you so much for watching the shows. Thank you so much for being here tonight. I really appreciate you. Please be sure to subscribe.